Populations and sustainability. A population is a group of organisms of one species that lives in the same place at the same time and can successfully reproduce. Populations increase when individuals within the population reproduce at rates that are greater than what's needed to replace individuals that have left the population or have died. Exponential growth. Exponential growth is an accelerated growth that produces a J-shaped curve when the population is graphed against time. Exponential growth can only occur under certain conditions for a short period of time. Looking at the graph below, we can see the population growth of elephants in South Africa's Kruger National Park. Until the 1960s, the elephants were not protected. Once they were protected, they experienced exponential growth because they were allowed to grow exponentially because they weren't being hunted. Exponential growth, it can be there's limiting factors that can limit the amount of growth, distribution, or the amount of a population in an ecosystem. And these are known as density independent factors. Is a limiting factor in the environment that does not depend on the members in the population per unit area. Density dependent factor is a limiting factor in the environment that depends on the number of members in a population per unit area. So the density dependent depends. The density independent does not depend. What are examples of density dependent factors and density independent factors? Well, independent factors would be things like fire, floods, storms, drought. Density dependent factors would be disease, food supply, water supply, carrying capacity. Carrying capacity is the size of a population that can be supported indefinitely by the resources of a given ecosystem. When a necessary resource is used at a rate that exceeds the carrying capacity, the population will reduce until the population size is in balance with the available resources. So if you look at the white-tailed deer population from 1983 to 2003, we can see that we've reached a maximum. So they probably hit a maximum and then they reduced. So we're probably looking at comfortably around 80 to 70 is where they can live. But now, because we have more people and we have less land, it's even gone lower. So carrying capacity. So if we look at first seal population, we can look that here's our breeding male seal populations in thousands. And from about 1920 to 1935, we have exponential growth. or even really 1915. And then we reach our carrying capacity between 1935 and 1940. Interactions among species. An ecological niche is a way an organism occupies a position in an ecosystem, including all necessary biotic, living, abiotic, non-living factors. No two species can occupy the exact same ecological niche or provide the exact same services to their ecosystem, because no two species live in exactly the same way. So here we have brown bats, and they are living in a cave, which would be part of their ecological niche. Human ecological niches and population. Sustainable use is a use that does not lead to long-term depletion of resources or affect the diversity of an ecosystem from which the resources is obtained. The exact carrying capacity of Earth's humans is unknown. If we look at the first graph, we can see that we had a very low population for a long period of time. We see a dip in the population in the 1400s, which would be significant of the Black Plague, deadly plague, and then we see a jump, and it's quite a radical jump, and this would be part of the Industrial Revolution. And then we see just how far we've come, and that we're advancing with medical advances, scientific advances. We can get our resources from pretty much anywhere in the world. So our ecological system is very large. Ecological footprints and carrying capacity. An ecological footprint is a measure of the impact of a human, individual, or population on the environment. The world has finite, meaning limited, resources, and consuming large quantities of resources is unsustainable. Sustainability is the use of Earth's resources, including land and water, at levels that can be continued forever. So, if we look at the ecological footprint graph below, we note that of top countries, the global average, we see that Canada's here. The US is the top. So they consume the most per person per area. But we are only 6th back. And do note that China and India have very large populations. So their global average is below average, but realizing that their population size is extremely large. So let's recap. Populations tend to increase exponentially when there's an abundant availability of resources. When resources that are needed by a population become limited, the carrying capacity of an ecosystem has been reached. Each species occupies an ecological niche which has biotic and abiotic components. The ecological niche of humans has been broadened by our intellectual abilities and the development of technology. Humans have altered the ecosystem that supports us, so our carrying capacity is high. However, modern human societies are still subject to ecological principles of carrying capacity. An ecological footprint is used to describe the impact of a person's or population's consumption habits that have on the supporting ecosystem.